It's me, Brittany Bowles, back with another chapter of my book, Finding Starlight. Finding Starlight is the true story of my life as told through the lens of a past life regression session that really happened. Um, and my hope for sharing it with you all is to inspire you to tell your own story, to inspire you to believe in something bigger than what you've been told or that which you've been presented with, to encourage you to figure out what your magic is and how to use it, um, and just to sort of say to you, you're not alone in the horrible or wonderful things that you have experienced here as a human on Earth. So, here we are, back with another chapter. I know that there's a lot going on in the world, and me sharing my story might not make sense. And the only way that I can address that is to say that it's what I know how to do, and that the work that I do um, is really personal, and it's really about, I think, about all of us and trying to get there however we can. So, please forgive me for taking up airspace if it's not what you want to see out there. May you find something that does inspire you. But if you're watching this, maybe that's because you want to, or it does inspire you in some way. So thanks for joining me. And as always, I will say that other chapters, the prior chapters, can be found on my website, brittanyBowles.com, or on my Facebook page on my videos tab. Instagram is now posting my IGTV videos as well. And you guys are over there. So, kind of just another little note before we get started. This chapter does have some trigger warnings. I do talk about mental health struggles in this chapter, and references to thoughts of suicide. I think that's all that there is in skimming it. So, be aware of your own triggers, and as always, you can reach out to me to just talk or share your story or ask for support or tools, or Reiki or cards or whatever it is to support you on your mental health journey. And I hope that you never feel alone in that. I'm definitely here for you. Woo! That was a lot of intro. So here we go. Chapter 26 of my unpublished book, Finding Starlight, begins now. Chapter 26, Magical Gifts. Sitting in the forest, waiting as patiently as a fairy could, Katrina was bursting with question. I only just cleared the fuzz out of my head, enough to make eye contact, when she practically shouted, "Is Henry Hank?" Instead of answering her, I said, "I have a rule when I read cards or talk to my guides. Don't ask questions to which you don't want answers." She nodded. Most intuitives have that rule. This is a question that I don't want to explore too deeply. What happened with Hank was beautiful, faded even. It was a moment in time like nothing I had felt before or since. I considered my explanation. Matt, like so many others in my life, was a bright light, I began. He smiled and shone like a spotlight, and he lit the way for me for a long time. I paused to frame what I would say next, feeling that it was coming together in my heart, but I was unsure how to bring it to language. Do you ever notice how moths can't help themselves around an electric light? They hover there until they die or until the light turns off. The saying, like a moth to a flame, has never felt appropriate to me. I get a weird, sad feeling when I see the powdery outline of what used to be a moth. The poor things just turn to dust. Flames, they burn hot. They have an unmistakable field of energy. Animals, moths even, can sense long before they get close. One doesn't accidentally walk into a fire. My relationship with Matt had me feeling like a moth. I was light and dusty, floating near his light in a stasis that neither he nor I recognized. When I was near Hank, I burned not just in my skin, but from within. My inner fire was rekindled. It was an energetic roar, louder than the sea and more magnetic than the poles. I chose to walk into that flame, and in a way, I think it consumed me, forged me into something stronger. That dust was melted, gone, transformed. I had a fiery rebirth, and I swore never again to be fooled by an electric light. Katrina sat in utter silence as I continued my monologue. Jeremy has a force field too. It's not a fire. He doesn't feel like Hank or anyone else I've met. He feels at his strongest something like me. Familiar, powerful, ancient. He is who I chose to spend this part of my life with, who I decided to marry. Whether we have shared such a contract before is of no consequence, as we're sharing it now. This is a lesson for me in choosing, I think. Living with the choices I've made in this lifetime with dignity and regard for their sacredness is a gift. Looking back for too long is a distraction, a detraction from what I have now. The other lesson here, I think, is in letting go. Hank and I loved each other. The timing was what it was, though, and we made a choice to be grateful for the experience and to move on along our own paths. That's a choice I will honor backward and forward in this non-linear thing we call time. We sat together, my fairy and I, in contemplative and companionable silence. She broke it first. 2 lessons or more, then, from a past life as a noblewoman living on the Isle of France. More, then? I asked, confused by her change of topic and the strange fog I had around this memory. You and your guide had what we call a life review in that green-blue place, she reminded me. In that review, you remarked that you wished you had shared more with others. What does that mean to you now? I certainly lived a life of ease as a French noblewoman on that island, didn't I? Perhaps I was referring to wealth and benevolence. Maybe I ought to have done more for my community. Perhaps, Katrina said, but I think you were referring directly to the magic your mother gave you. I grinned. I hoped she would say something like that. Taking the bait, I said, magic. So I really was a magical person back in the 1700s. Why do you think you visited that particular life? She asked. Why would you have been reminded of that particular, exact desire by your guide? Probably because it has something to do with why I'm here, I answered. The thought struck me like thunder. Why I'm here with Katrina, here on a quantum transformation journey, here on Earth as Brittany. She looked like she had heard my thought before I had. You're saying that I need to share this magic with others in my life now? I had to ask to be sure. She nodded. Well, what magic, for goodness sake? I exclaimed with more frustration than was warranted. Your magic, she said. Like I know what that is, I thought. If I had magic, why would I have come here so you could tell me all about who I am and what I'm meant to do? She's not really telling me those things, though. You know what's funny? I wanted to change the subject. What? She played along. When I moved to St. Croix, I was starry-eyed, young, naive. I was convinced that I would be swept off my feet by the love of my life, and run off into the sunset to live happily ever after. It sounds to me as though that's exactly what happened, Katrina said. Except more than once. We both laughed as the cloud joined in with flashing beachy moments. I learned to live while I was there, I said, watching the happy display. I learned to love in an entirely new way. I finally broke through the protective barriers that I had set up for myself. I was open and ready for the universe to bring me everything I wanted. And what would that have been? Katrina asked. Well, I still have no idea, I exclaimed. It wasn't long after Hank left the island that I did too. Emily held space for me as I finally ended my relationship with Matt. He went crazy. I hid from the world. It became clear that I needed to get off the rock for a while. Emily suggested that we travel to New England for the summer to see where she grew up and work in restaurants for the season. Having never been to the East Coast, I agreed. Something new, I thought, for a while, and then I would head to India, learn yoga and meditation from a guru, travel the world, and return home to my little island once things settled down. Oh, no big deal, Katrina joked. Pretty ambitious, huh? I laughed at myself. That's how I ended up here in New Hampshire. I winked like New Hampshire was a ridiculous and undesirable place to be, but with some sarcasm to imply that maybe it wasn't so bad. It was a weird transition, though, I continued. I kept having these intense dreams. Once I woke up screaming, and Emily just hugged me until I fell back to sleep. She sounds like a lovely friend, Katrina said. She really has been, I confirmed, and I'm so grateful to her for bringing me here. I wasn't sure that I would be able to say and to mean that, but it's true. I don't know what my life would look like if she hadn't brought me to Wolfboro. Another dream I had that I will never forget took place under the sea. It was a perfectly teal blue, crystal clear, deep water. Whales and dolphins swam around me as I floated under the surface. It almost seemed like I was flying. I was utterly calm, content, peaceful. And a sailboat appeared overhead, and suddenly, like happens in dreams, I was on the deck of the ship, heading to shore. I knew that once I arrived on land, I would meet a seer. She would read my future using the ancient I Ching method of casting sticks. So sure enough, an ancient, wrinkled, and slightly hunched Asian woman sat on the sand, waiting for me. She was laying out cards from a deck face down. Even in my dream, I thought, well, this is odd. I Ching is done with sticks, and these look like tarot cards. Nevertheless, she finished drawing the cards and opened her mouth to speak to me, that which I desperately wanted to hear. I paused for dramatic effect. Well, what did she say? What was on the cards? Katrina jumped on my paws as I had hoped she would. I woke up. I never got to see the cards. I shook my head. Dreams, man, I tell ya. Such a roundabout way of giving information sometimes. But luckily for me, I already knew how to interpret my dreams and follow their messages, especially when they're as powerful as this one was. It was a dream about intuition, transition, and stepping into a fluid new life. Reading tarot cards had been on my heart for a while, so I took the cue to go shopping for my first deck. Emily's stepmom knew of just the place. It was the same store where I learned about you. Of course it was, she said with a smile. No coincidences. We walked into the store, and already I was in love with it. A few shelves were dedicated entirely to tarot and oracle cards. There were so many choices. I walked right up to an eye-level shelf And there, staring me in the face, was a red and tan box labeled, I kid you not, I Ching Tarot. Meant for you, just as the dream lady said. Katrina nodded. Thus began my journey into divination. Well, purposeful divination, anyway. I smirked. I mean, there was that whole part of my life before I met the healer in the hospital that I had been spying on people, plus all the other dreams and weird feelings I'd been having my whole life. But yeah, this was me finally choosing to use my intuition on purpose as a means of spiritual growth. I was ready to start being the person I was meant to be, however that looked. What did you see in your I Ching cards? She asked. Well, they started working really well right away. Emily and I had gone to New York to work in a restaurant there, but the arrangements were not what we expected. It reeked of bad vibes, and I just knew we had to get out of there. The cards confirmed my fears, and we left. When we got back to Wolfboro, we settled into restaurant jobs and finally got our own apartment, moving out of our parents' basement where we had been holed up. At this point, you still plan to leave at the end of the summer to travel the world? Katrina asked. It was a valid question because here we were in her living room in New Hampshire 2 years later. Yeah, that was the plan. I rolled my eyes. What actually happened was that I started coming into my power. I was practicing yoga nearly every day, along with using my tarot cards and spending time in the woods. My intuition was as strong as it had ever been, and I was feeling energy again. What do you mean, feeling energy again? Katrina wanted to know. I mean that I could feel invisible fields around people and places. Sometimes I could even see it with my eyes, like heat waves or haze. It's something that has happened to me on and off for years, but at this point it was growing distractingly strong. Distracting how? She prompted. Scary, I guess. I felt manic, a little crazy. Sometimes when I would practice yoga, I would feel sparks shooting out of my fingertips. I worried I'd start the place on fire or spontaneously combust. We both laughed at the ridiculousness. An interesting relationship you have with fire, she observed. Your mother starts a fire, and yet you never come to fear it. You take up fire dancing when your life feels out of control. You use a fire ritual to clear out your heart space. And now you describe your manic energy as the sensation of sparks. Why do you think this is so? She is so good at asking the right questions, I realized. Fire is my friend. I figured it out as I spoke. I think I relate to its wildness. Fire burns away impurities and leaves behind a rich soil ripe for regrowth. Or, in some cases, nothing but ashes blown into the wind. It's mercurial, warm, bright, full of potential. Fire is captivating to watch, which is why I love to dance with it. And it's powerful to create, which is why I dance with it too. I smiled at that realization. Fire, I thought. My friend. Who knew? What yoga does to calm and center my soul, fire brings to life in my spirit. I like that, I said. I like that a lot. There's fire in yoga too, you know. Tapas, dedication to practice. Austerity. I did not know that, she said. But how do the sparks from your fingertips end up keeping you here in New Hampshire? She brought me back to my tale with this question, which, to be honest, I was still asking myself. Emily was presented with an opportunity that she couldn't refuse, to finish her education and step into the career that she wanted. She needed support to get through the year, and I offered to hold the same space for her that she had held for my journey. I said I would stay the year in New Hampshire. Something about that choice filled me with dread. It was like I was giving up on my newfound freedom, walking away from my path. It felt crushing, like I had moved back to Minnesota and done absolutely nothing with my life. I was not proud to tell it like this, especially not to someone who had spent her whole life in this place and clearly cherished the beauty of the lake, the woods, the mountains. But it was true, and the sacred forest wouldn't let me tell it any other way. I became more depressed than I had been at any point on St. Croix. It felt final, full of heavy suicide and grim dejection. I had come to see myself as failed, hopeless, and alone. My memories of St. Croix and all of the progress I had made there were gone. I couldn't access warmth or light anymore. I remember calling Matt and telling him how not okay I was. I confided that I was having thoughts of killing myself again, and that I didn't know what to do. Maybe it was because I knew how far away he was, physically and emotionally, at that point, that it felt safe to speak to him. I certainly wasn't looking for a way out of it. Not this time. Cloud moved from my lap to the space between us, once again showing my handwriting on its white surface. Drenched and cold, aching and sad, girl begins to wake. Turns her troubled face away from the dawn she cannot take. Lies in bed and hopes to die, she cannot summon any strength. I looked away, remembering the words. It was what I thought might be my final saga. How strange that I could regress this quickly after everything I learned and felt on island. I knew what I needed to do to stay healthy. Yoga, writing, connecting with people. I knew the taste of more, but I just could not find the strength. Could not bring myself to seek it, I admitted. What did you do? She asked with compassion in her eyes. I didn't do anything, I said. My family did. And that concludes chapter 26 of my book, Finding Starlight. I'll share the next chapter, chapter 27, Love Like a Mountain, next Thursday. Until then, I encourage you to find your magic, as Nako would say, find your medicine and use it. Every piece of us deserves to shine, deserves to be touched by light. Our shadows, our sadness, our despair, the parts of us that are afraid or want to jump to judgment or have a hard time forgiving, the parts of us that feel unworthy and unlovable, and the parts of us that feel fiery and powerful and big. So find each little piece of who you are. Use every ounce of courage that you have to uncover those parts of your soul and bring them back together. I always say that this isn't about killing the ego. This human existence is not about killing part of ourselves. It's about transforming it and integrating it and having the courage to be our whole, real selves. Believe me, if I can share all of this with you, every mistake, bad decision, triumph, sadness, even in these times, you can do it too. Not this necessarily, not everybody wants to, but you can certainly figure out a way to find wholeness and to come back to yourself and to use your medicine. So, thank you for indulging me and my story, and thank you for following along this journey to freedom with me. How appropriate on this weekend, 4th of July. So, anyway, that's it. I won't take up any more of your time. I will see you on Thursday. If you'd like to catch up on prior chapters of my book, they are on BrittanyBowles.com or on my Facebook page. I also have a 20 chapter recap if you're just now starting to get into it and you don't want to go back and watch every video. Just watch the recap of chapters 1 through 20 and go from there. All right, thanks so much. Until next time, may you be magical and safe and well.